Archbishop Vigano has just released an exclusive interview stating that he is not going to attend his excommunication trial for schism. We also see that a group of Spanish nuns who denied that Pope Francis is the Pope have been excommunicated for schism, just like Vigano is about to be. And also, we see that Bishop Schneider is making heretical statements that are contrary to Catholic dogma, therefore, they are heresy, and they also fall within an anathema. Stay tuned for more. Well, welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. I want to take a look at Vigano's announcement that he makes on his schismatic community's website, Exsurge Domine, ironically named because that is actually the apostolic or papal bull that excommunicated Martin Luther. And one of the propositions Luther was excommunicated for was for cherishing excommunications. Something ironically that Vigano says he does. He cherishes his excommunication. So it's pretty interesting connection there. But be that as it may, people are saying, by the way, there's no audio. Well, at least only one person is saying that. Let me make sure that, okay, it's working on my end. So I think everything's good on my end, Jade. So I think it might be one of your settings. Okay. I did a whole show like 30 minutes before where my microphone wasn't working. So I'm always wanting to make sure that people can hear me. Well, let's get back to it. I want to talk about his announcement because I find some points that he makes in here really, really interesting in light of some information that has come out about Vigano recently. So let's take a look at it together. Let's walk through his announcement. Where he responds to the excommunication trial. He says, the reports spread by certain media outlets, America Magazine specifically, stating that I presented myself yesterday, Thursday, June 20th, at the Palace of the Holy Office as intimated to me by the decree of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith is devoid of any foundation. These reports are completely false. So America Magazine also came out and, retracted and said, okay, turns out he didn't show up, which was very weird that they reported that because they kind of gave some really specific details. And so if that turned out to be false, then my question is, gosh, how did you get really specific details like this? So it's a little weird. The Jesuit magazine America, the media arm of the Society of Jesus in the United States and the megaphone of the Church of Mercy of the Jesuit Bergoglio, has rushed ahead while Vatican News here was still totally unaware of the decree sent to me on June 11th, only by a simple email without respecting those formalities necessary for the validity of communication of a decree. And I don't know what he's talking about because Vatican News was already reporting about the situation at the same time as this stuff with America Magazine. So I'm not sure what he means there. And which I myself published on X 2 hours before the meeting scheduled at the Dicastery. Although all the elements were clearly stated in my communique, inferences and speculations took precedence in typical Jesuit style. Haste in a bad counselor. Therefore, O'Connell's article, Archbishop Vigano charged with schism by the Vatican, that appeared yesterday at America, seems to have been written even before I made the Vatican document public. Don't know about that, but okay. This reveals the close contiguity between the Vatican apparatus and America Magazine and confirms a very precise strategy aimed at liquidating my trial with a condemnation that has already been decided by Bergoglio and his zealous collaborator, Tucho Fernandez. Nandez. Let's go, Nandez. Man, he is shaking things up. Love it. Um, the schismatics hate him because he's getting the job done. Um, they're really upset about that. Offer of the scandalous pornographic pamphlet, The Mystical Passion, as well as whatever that title is. O'Connell writes, the decree says that it considered superfluous the prior investigation in accordance with Canon 717 that states, whenever an ordinary has knowledge, which at least seems true of a delict, he is carefully to inquire personally or through another suitable person about the facts, circumstances, and imputability, unless such an inquiry seems entirely superfluous. This means that the evidence against him had already been collected by the dicastery and did not require full investigation. Much of it was already in the public domain. As can be seen, evidence is considered superfluous and the procedure is deliberately simplified in order to reach a conviction as soon as possible. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there really didn't even need to be a trial. In some ways, they could have just gone ahead and excommunicated him, and we don't even have to go through this. It's an open and shut case. So why is he upset? Yeah, of course, this was already predetermined. There's nothing to deny because you've said it over and over and over. So, and then you admit that the evidence is authentic. So what are you complaining about? Of course, this was expedited so that you're excommunicated quickly. You're a disaster. You're a cancer to the body of Jesus. I'm glad that it was expedited. And that's not all. The Jesuits of America are already giving indication about my procedural destiny. The extrajudicial penal trials in accordance with Canon 1364, which states an apostate from the faith, a heretic or schismatic, incurs an automatic excommunication without prejudice to the provision of Canon 194, that he or she may also be punished with the penalties mentioned in Canons 1336. This means, among other things, that the excommunication would be declared publicly and it would remain in force until the convicted person repents. St. Canon 1364 also states if a long-standing contempt or the gravity of scandal calls for it, other penalties may be added, not excluding dismissal from the clerical state. Yeah, I mean, you would think that he would be laicized. The Judicial Competence of America magazine, however, seems to have no place in the Vatican, where it has become common to use extrajudicial trials. See, he's really deflecting here, and he's latching on to this issue with America magazine. The bigger issue here, Vigano, is you're schismatic. That's the bigger issue, and you're being excommunicated. And also, you covered up certain aspects in relation to Cardinal McCarrick, as we'll see here. That's the bigger issue, and you're deflecting at this point. He says, beyond the media hype, the former Cardinal McCarrick, who in a serious trial would have been made to compensate the victims of his crimes after the examination of testimonies that could have been clarified, continued to work for Bergoglio in the United States and China. Let me stop there. This guy has the nerve to still talk about McCarrick. Wow. So Vigano, we know according to this report, and I encourage everybody to read it, report of the Holy See's institutional knowledge and decision-making related to former McCarrick, Cardinal McCarrick. Go and read page 378 to 388. And you're going to find out it was actually Vigano when he was nuncio in 2012 who did not follow up with allegations made about McCarrick, did not confront McCarrick, did not follow up with the people who made the accusations, did not follow up with court proceedings about it, did not update the Holy See with information about it. So the Holy See wasn't aware of credible claims against McCarrick going back to 2012. He dropped the ball entirely and instead was going around to events with him, not restricting his schedule when he had the opportunity to, not restricting his movement when he had the opportunity to. Instead, going in places in public with McCarrick and then publicly celebrating him, knowing that he's accused of this stuff, knowing it. And meanwhile, writing to some other people, acting like he's concerned about sex abuse in relation to McCarrick, but then in public doesn't do anything that shows that he's concerned. And then when it comes to talking directly to McCarrick, doesn't address any of that to his face. And he had multiple opportunities. Instead, he goes and publicly lauds him on video. We have video of him doing this, publicly praising him, saying, "You're loved by all of us," knowing all of this stuff about McCarrick. He is the one who failed to follow up with credible accusations, and thus the Holy See was not able to be aware of credible accusations until much later. And that is when, in 2018, I believe, it was Pope Francis who laicized him, when the Vatican finally got the information that they needed, which they would have had back in 2012 if he had done his job. And instead of just owning up and saying, "Sorry, y'all, I dropped the ball, here's what happened," instead of doing that, he blamed Pope Francis, and still to this day says Pope Francis is the one who covered up for him, when in fact all of the evidence says it's actually Vigano who dropped the ball. I go into this in detail, extreme detail, in a video that I did right here on this channel for about 3.5 hours of material. I put a link to it in the show notes. It is called "Uncovering the Real Story, Archbishop Vigano and Cardinal McCarrick." It's already being cited as authoritative in this area. I mean, it is already making waves, and you need to watch it. At the very least, read the sections from this report about Vigano. And there's a lot, because there's a lot between Vigano and McCarrick. There was a lot going on in their relationship. But read at least 378 to 388. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, from this report that came out in 2020. It's been out for 4 years. Vigano has never, ever been able to overturn it. He hasn't even tried to. He just gives veiled threats against those who speak about this, and that's it. Never addressed the facts against him to this day. Instead, he knows that most people don't know this information, so he can still get away with this and play people and tell them, "Oh, McCarrick." He can still use these buzzwords because he still knows he has a lot of credibility in the minds of a lot of people, because he had your Burks and your Stricklands of the world who in 2018 said he was credible and were backing him up in some ways and vouching for him. And when this information came out that he didn't have the receipts, that in fact the receipts point at him, they never came out and set the record straight and defended Pope Francis's name. So in the minds of most people, they still believe the lie. So he knows he can get away with it. But you know what? We here at the channel Reason of Theology, we're going to make sure people know the truth. You're not going to continue to lie to people. You're not going to continue to do that. You're going to be held accountable for your lack of action against McCarrick in this 2012 situation and others at the time. And when you start to read this stuff and you see all of the receipts, all of the evidence, all of the documentation against Vigano, and the concerning relationship between Vigano and McCarrick, it's going to blow you away. In fact, there are people who are furious with me right now for exposing it. Let me show you. Let me show you one wonderful Vigano fan who just emailed me. I won't read it to you because it's pretty profane, but you can see it pretty well right here. Here's one wonderful fan of Vigano. Here's what happens when you expose the truth and they're confronted with the truth about this idol of theirs that they've created. Vigano. This is what happens. Wild, wild stuff. When people are confronted with the truth about their heroes, yeah, it doesn't seem to go over well. So let's certainly pray for that person and many others who continue to be deceived by Vigano. But this is why I say, how dare you even speak about McCarrick as if you really are concerned about sexual abuse? If you were concerned about sexual abuse, Vigano, why didn't you address this issue in 2012? Why didn't you follow up with this claim? If you say you did, then great, let's see the documentation for it. because everybody involved in that situation, including the person who made the accusation, they say you never contacted them and you never followed up. And the Holy See never received information from you about that trial for priest 3 and others. So show us the receipts if you have them. Otherwise, it's clear you dropped the ball. So how dare you talk about sex abuse as if you really care about it? Address the allegations made about you, or everyone in the world who sees this will end up knowing you are a fraud and a liar. Well, let's continue with what he says here, because it gets even more interesting. He wants to talk about Rupnik. Thanks to the intervention of his protector, had his excommunication lifted. He was not even dismissed from the clerical state. On the contrary, he was welcomed and incarnated in a diocese in Slovenia. And by the way, you know what this is doing? It's deflection. Oh, well, you guys want to excommunicate me, but y'all didn't do this and this and this and this and this. It's like one of the kids coming up to me and, oh, well, Daddy, you're telling me that, I'm in trouble for doing this, but so-and-so, my brother and my sister, they did this and this. Yeah, that's not going to work. That's not going to work at all. Number 2, he doesn't have his facts straight. You want to talk about Pope Francis and Rupnik? Oh, you mean the Pope Francis who opened the investigation on Rupnik? You mean that Pope Francis? Still have an investigation on him. Pope Francis lifts the statute of limitations in the case of Rupnik. Lifts the statutes so that he can be investigated, to allow a canonical procedure to take place regarding allegations against the former Jesuit. That Pope Francis. So you want to bring up Rupnik? Yeah, you know what? That doesn't look good for you, because actually it proves the point of Pope Francis. He is investigating these things. Now, in your case, Vigano, when credible claims came to you, did you look into them? Did you follow up with them? No. So don't dare talk about, well, so-and-so is doing this and that. What did you do? You dropped the ball. The whole world is sooner or later going to find out about that, and you're going to answer for it. He says, evidently, criticizing the council is considered a far more serious crime than those of McCarrick and Rupnik. I therefore wish to make it clear, I did not go to the Vatican yesterday. Oh, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter anymore. You're excommunicated either way. You're a schismatic either way. You're creating your own parallel schismatic church either way. So deal with the more substantive stuff here. Fine, you set the record straight. You didn't go. Whoop-de-doo. Now let's talk about the real issues. What about your relationship with McCarrick? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your schismatic mentality and your schismatic behavior and your schismatic seminary. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about you being excommunicated from the body of Christ and how that harms your soul. And right now, objectively speaking, you're on the path to perdition unless you repent. It's a bad thing when you're excommunicated. That should be a sign to you, I went wrong somewhere. When the Church of Jesus excommunicates you, let that be a sign you did something wrong. This isn't some local excommunication by a local bishop. This is the Holy See excommunicating you. Let that weigh on your conscience so that you repent. Let's have that discussion. Let's talk about that. Instead, he's just really hung up on, I didn't go to the trial. Okay. Now what? Can we get to the more substantive stuff here? I have no intention of going to the Holy Office on June 28th, and I have not delivered any statement or document in my defense to the dicastery, because the documentation or the decree said that he had until the 28th to notify them if he's not going to come to his trial on the 20th. So he's not going to do it. So in other words, he will be judged in his absence, and all the evidence is against him, and he's not contesting the evidence. He's confirming the evidence. Ergo, he will be excommunicated. Now, he's already been internally excommunicated. We're talking about an official decree excommunicating him, validating what has already taken place in the internal forum probably years ago. So that's what's to come. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. There's no different outcome. He's going to be excommunicated We're just waiting on the official decree. And he doesn't have an issue with that. He wears it as a badge of honor, just like Martin Luther wore his badge of honor of excommunication as a badge of honor, which was, again, ironically, the 24th proposition he was condemned for in Exsurge Domine. And he says, this dicastery whose authority I do not recognize, there it is, you're schismatic. Nor do I recognize the authority of its prefect, you're schismatic. Nor do I recognize the authority of the one who appointed him, the Pope, you're a schismatic. By your own mouth, by your own tongue, you condemn yourself. And everyone who follows him, you guys are also condemned. You guys are also schismatics. You guys are also cut off from the body of Christ. Let this be a warning to you. Turn away from that, because you're on the road to the lake of fire. Turn away, repent, come back into communion. The church will welcome you. How do you do that? Go to confession. Go to confession. Repent of the sin of schism and following the schismatic, and then follow the successor of St. Peter. The church will welcome you with open arms. Other than that, be aware. It's so clear. The successor of St. Peter is telling you, you follow this path of denying that Francis is the Pope, you're on the road to perdition. He says, I have no intention of submitting myself to a show trial in which those who are supposed to judge me impartially in order to defend Catholic orthodoxy are at the same time those whom I accuse of heresy. Wait, it's not an issue of them being impartial. You've already admitted to the evidence against you. It's not an issue of being impartial. The evidence brought forward against you is you deny Francis is the Pope. And you're literally doing it right here. It's not an issue of impartiality. It's an issue of, here is what schism is. You're being schismatic. You're backing up the fact that you're schismatic. You're not even contesting it. So why are you deflecting to talk about impartiality of a trial? You don't dispute the evidence against you. But again, this is good enough for most of his followers. Most of his followers are already hell-bent against the Catholic Church and Pope Francis. They're already sold on all of these lies. This will impact them. But for the people who are trying to seriously weigh this stuff, I'm talking to you. You can clearly see this is a tactic of deflection. True to form, he's been doing this for years. He says he accuses them of heresy, treason, and abuse of power. Talk about hypocrisy. And among them are precisely the Jesuits, the first proponents of all the moral and doctrinal deviations of the last 60 years, starting with James Martin, the LGBTQ activist, who is a regular visitor of Santa Marta. Yeah, you mean that James Martin that Pope Francis clearly doesn't agree with on issues of homosexuality. Francis says homosexuality is a sin. When does James Martin say that? Francis says gay marriage is not marriage. James Martin says it is. So whatever you want to say about James Martin and Pope Francis doesn't agree with what James Martin says about this. Now, I agree. The guy needs to be excommunicated. He needs to be disciplined if he doesn't repent and turn away from some of the stuff that he's doing. I agree. But see, this is how Satan operates. He'll sprinkle in a grain of truth in with the poison. There's some legitimate grievances that this group has, and I think Martin is one of them. But see, what they will then introduce as a solution is worse than James Martin. They introduce the sin of schism. Worse than heresy, by the way. The sin of schism is worse than the sin of heresy. So the solution that they propose is even worse than the very thing they're reacting against. So certainly what they're offering us isn't any better. In fact, it's even worse. And two wrongs don't make a right. But again, he knows, hey, all I have to do is say these trigger words. I just need to say Rupnik. I just need to say McCarrick. I just need to say Father James Martin. I just need to say certain things, and all these people will get on board with me. America says a canon lawyer who has read the Archbishop's defense statement told America this is the major argument for the prosecution. It is most egregious act of schism. He explained that the extrajudicial procedure envisaged usually does not take much time. The anonymous canon lawyer considers my statement as proof of my schismatic will, but the whole question concerns which is the church to which Bergoglio belongs and the de facto schism from the church, true church that he has already accomplished over and over again. See, again, deflecting. We know that Pope Francis is Pope. That's Catholic theology because of the universal and peaceful acceptance of his election. That's Catholic doctrine. So we already know he's Pope. So we know if you break communion with him, you're in schism. So he's deflecting. And he's trying to go back into the area of, well, is he really the Pope? I don't think he's the Pope. Catholic doctrine weighs against you on this. The facts weigh against you on this. This has already been refuted. There's no more argumentation that you guys have to say that Francis isn't the Pope. Every bit of evidence you've brought forward has been debunked thoroughly. So you can't try to deflect and bring it back to, well, I'm not in schism. He's not even the Pope. Again, though, this is good enough for most of his followers, though. Because most of his followers, let's be honest, they're not well trained in theology, especially ecclesiology. So this is good enough for them. He says, Bergoglio's church is not the Catholic Church, but rather that conciliar church born from the Vatican Council II and recently rebranded with no less heretical name of Synodal Church. Okay. By the way, Vigano, a whole bunch of popes in the post-conciliar period have backed up Vatican II. So if Francis isn't the Pope, and you're also calling into question Vatican II, don't you have to also call into question John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul the 1st, John Paul the 2nd, Benedict the 16th as well? Don't you also have to call them into question? They've all backed up in their magisterium Vatican II. So aren't you going to now question their pontificates? Are you going to become an old school set of acontis for us and say there hasn't been a pope since 1958? It's coming. It's coming. That view with Vigano is coming because, and maybe it's already here, because this is what his view leads to. You're going back questioning the validity of Vatican II. You got to question all the popes who have promulgated it. Not just the initial one, but all the popes subsequent to Vatican II who have promulgated it and taught its magisterial authority. You got to question all of them. You got to say all of them are the Pope as well. So he's spiraling out of control really quickly, and so are his followers. It says, if it is from this church that I am declared to be separated by schism, it will be for me a cause of honor and pride. Again, the very thing that Luther was excommunicated for. Look, I'm sorry, anybody who has ever studied the issues, y'all can see through this at this point. If you've been watching Reason and Theology, you already know this is absurd. And that, again, it also goes against Vatican I and the fact that it teaches there will be perpetual successors to the See of St. Peter. If there hasn't been a pope since 1958, guess what? Vatican I's claim that there will be perpetual successors to the See of St. Peter has been falsified. Ergo, Catholicism has been debunked. Ergo, you shouldn't waste your time with Catholic theology. You should be Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, or something else. So if what he is saying is true, I don't know why he's a set of acontist. I don't know why he's not Eastern Orthodox at that point, because Vatican I has been falsified. But he hasn't connected those dots just yet. A lot of these guys, they don't think through their theological positions very far. So he hasn't thought through that yet. Eventually, he will connect the dots. And at some point, you're going to see him go even more extreme than he already has. Perhaps the Eastern Orthodoxy or something else. But again, for those of y'all who know Vatican I, know that it says it has perpetual successors, you know this stuff is false. And you also know the claim that Vatican II teaches heresy is false. There's nothing heretical in it. And of course, to say that Francis isn't the Pope and all these other popes aren't the popes when we have this notion of universal peaceful acceptance of an election. The entire College of Bishops accepted Pope Francis's election. So if Pope Francis isn't the Pope, when the entire College of Bishops accepted him as the Pope, what does that mean about the entire College of Bishops? That they are not the College of Bishops and they're not popes, they're not bishops either. So now you've done away with the papacy and the College of Bishops. You no longer have a magisterium at all. What is that called? That's called Protestantism. So he's reinventing the same errors of several other schismatic and heretical groups. He just hasn't connected the dots. Now, I just connected the dots for you in a very brief fashion. I've hashed this out in much more detail in plenty of videos here on this channel, the Magisterium playlist that I have, and also the Catholic Controversies playlist. Go and check those out. I go into this in much more detail there, just giving you a really quick summary of it so that you see, look, there's responses to all of this, and he's holding to a position that others have already espoused, and they're heretics and schismatics. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So what did he really want to focus on here? Well, I didn't go to the meeting. Okay, all right. Well, can you address the other more pressing issues? Like the Church of Jesus Christ just excommunicated you, and you're just trying to say, well, no, the Church of Jesus didn't excommunicate me. It's just this false church of Pope Francis. Okay, then address the fact that if Pope Francis isn't the Pope, all of the bishops who say that he is the Pope also don't exercise any authority. So you're done with the papacy and you're done with the College of Bishops. You don't have anything left. You don't have a visible structure. Now we're on to the invisible church theory, which is Protestantism. Engage that kind of stuff. Well, he's of course not going to do that because he doesn't have to do that, because he knows most of the people who follow him aren't going to press him on any of those points. They're just going to hear, oh, Rupnik, Martin, McCarrick. They're just going to hear those trigger words. That's it. Oh, China. Yeah. Francis, China. There it is. Yeah. That's good enough for them. So they're not going to challenge him to do any more than that. So he's not going to. But we're going to challenge him. I want to take a look at a few other things now that we got that out of the way. We're going to take a look at here in just a moment after the break. Another schism, a group of nuns who are excommunicated by their archbishop because they're doing exactly what Vigano is doing. And that is they're saying that Francis isn't the Pope. So we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to take a look at Athanasius Schneider's heresy that falls within an anathema of an ecumenical council. So stay tuned for more right after this. Hey friends, I'm now teaching as an adjunct professor at Catholic Polytechnic University, and I am excited to announce that we will be offering the first ever Magisterial Studies Certificate program. It consists of 3 courses: an introduction to the magisterium, councils, dogmas, canons, and decrees, and evaluating magisterial teachings. If you want to further your education and learn more about Catholic teaching authority, this is the program for you. Check out catholicpolytechnic.org and click on the certificate tab at the top to sign up for the course today. Hey friends, are you thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy. In this book, I engage all of the objections that Eastern Orthodox have against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them, refute them, and I show why the Catholic Church alone possesses the fullness of the faith. Get your copy today at shop.catholic.com. All right, let's continue here. By the way, again, I want to remind y'all, hit that subscribe button. You know why? Well, you saw Vigano still promoting this nonsense about Pope Francis sheltering McCarrick. But I have shown you the documentation and receipts that, in fact, it was Vigano who failed to act on allegations made against McCarrick, who really sheltered McCarrick. So I've shown you that information. Most people haven't seen that yet. The narrative that has been going on since 2018 is that Pope Francis sheltered McCarrick. It's not true. But that is what most people still think whenever they hear McCarrick. So as you see Vigano, as of yesterday, still bringing up the name McCarrick, they're going to still be reconfirmed in that error. So help me reach people with the truth, because they're likely not going to hear it in most other places. So help me reach them by hitting that subscribe button. YouTube will do the rest with its algorithm and reach more people with this content. So if you've benefited from this video or others in the past, please do your part. Hit the like button and the subscribe button. Okay, so let's take a look at this next part here. By the way, I do want to give a shout out to Father Alan Benander, who's celebrating his 11 years of ordination today. That's awesome. And I want y'all to all pray for him. So say an Our Father, Hail Mary, and glory be for him and for his priesthood. Okay, so let's now take a look at this next story that we've been following here. And that is the case of a group of Spanish nuns who have said that, Pope Francis isn't the Pope. So they have also engaged in the act of schism. Their Archbishop has been very patient with them, given them every opportunity to repent. They chose not to do so, and thus they have now been excommunicated. The Archbishop has already decreed the excommunication. Again, on the one hand, it's sad that anyone is ever excommunicated, whether they are Vigano or this group, because that person is being cut off from the mystical body of Christ, and because they're cutting themselves off from salvific grace, unless they repent and come back to the church. So it's sad on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm happy that we are starting to exercise the excommunication option here when it comes to church discipline, because we've really been poor in church discipline, and especially excommunications. I'm happy that we're starting to do that. I'm celebrating that. Again, I don't celebrate the fall of anyone, but I do celebrate that the church is protecting itself, not allowing itself to continue to be infected with this cancer. And I just say, hey, let's keep it going. Let's address these other parts in the body of Christ that are also cancerous, that are on the other extreme progressive end. They need to be addressed as well. All right, so the Catholic Church in Spain has decreed the excommunication and expulsion from consecrated life of the Poor Clare nuns of Belorado after having committed the crime of schism. Canon 751 of the Code of Canon Law says schism is the rejection of subjection to the Roman Pontiff, so the Pope. So if you say Pope Francis isn't the Pope, you've rejected his authority. Therefore, that is the crime of schism, and there is an automatic excommunication for the crime of schism, for an act of schism. So if you deny that Francis is the Pope, even before a bishop or a pope says you're excommunicated, you're already excommunicated according to canon law. Now, maybe the bishop and maybe a pope will later on decree it, and so that everybody is aware that this has taken place. And that's what's going on here. The Archbishop is decreeing something that's already taken place in the internal forum. They've already internally excommunicated themselves from the church. But the bishop is making this known in the external forum so that everybody is clear these people are not Catholic, they're schismatics. So it's a denial of the subjection of the Pope or communion with the members of the church subject to him. The penalty for this crime is excommunication. In a press release dated June the 22nd, the Archbishopric of Burgos has communicated the decree of declaration of excommunication and the declaration of resignation ipso facto from consecrated life to each and every one of the 10 sisters who have incurred schism. So those that have been cut off and excommunicated, they're also no longer nuns. They're no longer in the consecrated life. This decision has been communicated by the Archbishop of Burgos, Pontifical Commissioner and legal representative of the monasteries of Belorado. The statement also points out that they are the same sisters who have shown their free and personal decision to leave the Catholic Church. Given this decision, it's necessary to remember that the declaration of excommunication is a legal action considered by the Church as a medicinal measure, which leads to reflection and personal conversion. It's there to help them turn away from their sin. So it's not there to be mean. It's there to help them turn away. Look at this in the comment section. Vigano is cancerous? He's been calling out nonsense that should not be associated with the church. Vigano should be celebrated for being a whistleblower. Look at the gaslighting. I literally have shown y'all the evidence, even in this very video that he's commenting on. I'm showing you the evidence that he's not the whistleblower. He's actually the one who covered for McCarrick in some ways, whether intentionally or not. He was sheltering him. And then number two, he failed to act on allegations made against McCarrick in 2012. You can't make this up. This is like hilarious. How many times do you have to say it? Ben, I'm not trying to pick on you. You're a perfect example of maybe hundreds of thousands, if not millions of others. You, Ben. That's why I'm using you as a teaching moment here. I'm literally in this very video showing you that evidence. I've gone into it in extreme detail, and you still gaslight us and say that he's a whistleblower. Ben, do you care to comment on Priest 3, who brought to Vigano's attention that he was sexually abused by Cardinal McCarrick? Do you care to address Priest 3's suit against McCarrick, the outcome of it, and the fact that Vigano didn't report this to the Holy Office when he was instructed to follow up with these claims? Do you care to comment on that, Vigano? Or Ben? Address that. And yes, I say cancerous because not only this issue, but he's also a schismatic who denies that Francis is the Pope. That's cancerous to the body of Christ. It's one of the worst sins that you can commit. Why are you defending this guy? I'd love to hear your response, Ben. It's a live show. So if you have a response, let's hear it. If you have a defense for him, if there's something that I haven't considered, let's hear it. Otherwise, is it the case that you didn't consider this and you came in on a stream defending a guy on the very stream that I've shown you didn't follow up with this case, as well as some other issues surrounding Vigano in relation to McCarrick? Again, I'm not going to reproduce 3.5 hours of material. I gave y'all a whole PowerPoint presentation for 3.5 hours. I put a link to it in the show notes. Go and watch it. I'm just giving you a little snippet here. Care to comment on any of that, Ben? Yeah. Anyways, let's go back to this one right here. The church always shows its depth of mercy, and as a mother is willing to welcome her children who, like the prodigal son, trust in God's mercy and begin the journey back to the Father's house, he adds. The statement also specifies that there continues to be a monastic community made up of the sisters who have not incurred excommunication. So there is a group here within that community that they don't agree with the schism. So they're not schismatics. And my heart goes out to them because they're kind of caught up in this mix where a group of the nuns in the monastery are schismatic, but they're like, I don't want to be a part of that. So they're not excommunicated. They're not removed from the consecrated life. They're still in good standing with the church. So just be aware, it's not all of them there, but it was like 10 of them there that were excommunicated. They have not supported the schism. They are the 5 older sisters and 3 other sisters who, although at this time they are not in the monastery, they belong to the community by being embedded in it. And I think they had left the monastery because they don't want to be like associated with the schismatic stuff. So I suspect what's going to happen is the schismatics are going to have to be kicked out. If they don't leave voluntarily, I suppose the police will have to be called to remove them. And then the faithful nuns will be brought back to the community. By the way, you remember the whole thing where some of those nuns were trying to sell the property, and they weren't telling like who the person was who made the offer. It's pretty clear it's the schismatic bishop, or somebody in relation to him that they were wanting it sold to. The way it comes across is the schismatic nuns were trying to get that property to their schismatic bishop that they were going to be following. That's the way it comes across. Finally, the text specifies that the older sisters continue to be a priority in our concerns. The Federation of Poor Clares of Our Lady has planned a way to immediately care for these sisters, and the Bellarado Monastery itself moving some sisters from other monasteries of the Federation to live in the monastery. That's so sad. I mean, they're having to deal with, these inconveniences because of the schismatic nuns. It's sorry to hear that, but I'm happy that they have remained faithful. And I hope all goes well for them and they're brought back to the monastery and they have a good and thriving community. We can certainly pray for them to that end. But I'm happy that they have held fast and not joined this nonsense. All right, so next up, I want to address Athanasius Schneider's comments that are heretical and fall under an anathema. Stay tuned for more. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com. All right. Well, I noticed that Ben H., who was vouching for Vigano, has not followed up with his claim in light of what I've showed on this very stream that he gaslighted us on. And so, Ben H., where you at? I thought we were going to get the goods from you. So you guys are able to make false claims, but then when you're called out for it with evidence, all of a sudden you guys disappear. Right. That's how most of y'all are. And see, what y'all then go and do, many of the guys like you, what will go and do is you'll then hide in the shadows and then send me harassing emails and slander me and lie about the Pope and many others. But when you're confronted with the facts, all of a sudden, you're MIA. Right. That's what I thought. All right. So let's take a look at this one here. There it is. Bishop Athanasius Schneider. By the way, I did verify the quote. In fact, I put a link to it on my Twitter. It comes from a 1P5 article. So I don't think this is like, let me see the date on it. Hold on. Let me check the date. He certainly hasn't repudiated this position. So, but let me check the date. Let's see. And I got people in the comment section asking me, how is it heretical? All right. Well, I'll go through it again. Let's see here. All right, here we go. I know I pinned it. All right. Bam. Aha. June 29, 2023 has not been repudiated. I'll put a link to the article in the show notes so you can see what he says there. But let's review this. And then for those who are saying, how is this heretical? I literally tagged people. Oddly enough, I tagged them. Or I included in the very post that I made here on Twitter, I included the video explaining how this is heretical. For some reason, you can literally point people to their answers and they'll still ask the question. I don't know what's going on there, but let's go through it anyway. The Pope does not have the power to ban the traditional Mass in Latin. Because it is a property of the entire church, the saints, and the church of all ages. The Pope simply has no power to abolish it, just as the Pope would not have the power to abolish the Apostles' Creed. No, no, no. You did not just put the Roman Rite, according to a particular expression and form, in the same category as the truths of the Apostles' Creed. That in and of itself is heretical. And that's not even the heresy part that I was initially wanting to address, but I have to point out that in and of itself is heretical. The Roman Rite, as much as I love it, and I love the Missal of 62, y'all know I like what he erroneously calls the Latin Mass. But come on, we know that this is not apostolic in it as a rite. So you can't put it on par with the apostolic truths that you find in the Apostles' Creed, like the resurrection from the dead and stuff like that. The only way to even say this would be if you really thought that the Roman Rite came down from heaven, from Jesus himself, which again, we've seen people recently say. And I have to just kind of laugh at it and say that it reminds me of those when I was a Protestant who told me that the King James Version of the Bible was good enough for Paul, so it's good enough for them. And he really spoke Elizabethan English. And Jesus gave us the KJV Bible. It's the Catholic version of that. And the only way to make what he's saying here true is if you really assume that the Missal of 62 and that particular expression of the Roman Rite, what he would call the Tridentine Rite or the Latin Mass, fell down from heaven and came to us from Jesus and the apostles. So in Matthew, wait, Jesus didn't speak Latin all the time, right? But it's not just the Latin part. It's not just the Latin part. It's also the form of the liturgy. It's the form of the rite itself, not just the language. It's the form of the rite, the elements of the rite. Those also are not apostolic. Now, I have no problem with them. I love them. I think it's a wonderful tradition of the church, but it's a lowercase t tradition. It's not a capital T tradition. And he literally put a lowercase t tradition on par with a capital T tradition. And he wants to say it's the property of the whole church. What happened to all of the other rites that are no longer extant? Did we abandon truths that are apostolic in nature because we no longer have those rites? What about the Celtic rite? Like, I don't know anybody who celebrates that. I guess we've all, as the church, abandoned something apostolic. It's literally absurd. But that's not the biggest and most heretical part here. The more heretical part is about papal authority. He says the Pope, and elsewhere in that link to the 1P3 article, 1P5 article, he says the Pope and the College of Bishops don't have the authority. So either way, like whether we speak of the College of Bishops or we speak of the papacy, they don't have the authority to discontinue the Missal of 62. Really? Wow. Okay, so as I've pointed out very often, the Council of Trent says that he does have that authority over rights, all rights, to alter them in ways that he sees fit. Vatican I says the same and even attaches an anathema on those who say otherwise, which is why I say he's under an anathema as well as heresy. And then I would also say that, or his proposition is under an anathema as well as heresy. And then I would also say that Mediator Dei and Pius XII have further confirmed what I'm saying here. I go into that in great detail in a video that I did last week. Let me pull it up for you so you can go and watch it. I give you all the receipts here. It's called, Is Pope Francis Banning Latin Mass, Examining the Rumors? Now, I go over the question of, should the Pope restrict the Missal of 62, erroneously called the Latin Mass? And by the way, again, it is erroneously called that. It is a misnomer. That's not its proper title. It would be best to maybe call it the Tridentine liturgy, or again, the Missal of 1962. Or the extraordinary form. Those are all acceptable terms. But I use this incorrect misnomer in that nomenclature, even though I know it's erroneous, because it's pretty difficult to qualify it every time in titles and stuff like that. So I just use what people usually know it as, even though I know it's wrong. Well, there's two questions to consider. Should he restrict access to it further? Should he discontinue it entirely? That's one question. Should he? And I explore that in this video. Then the other question I consider is, can he? So should versus could, right? Should he do it versus does he have the authority to do it? Now, should he do it? There's a lot to consider on that one. So watch the video. Can he do it? Yes, he can. Whether you like it or not, he can. According to 2 ecumenical councils and multiple papal documents, even in the preconciliar era, but also postconciliar era. Yes, he can. So watch that for further details on where Trent says that, where Vatican I says that, where Pius XII say that, and then kind of interact and grapple with that. You're not going to get Schneider grappling with those points, by the way. Again, because these guys know with their audience, this is good enough for them. They don't have to really... It kind of reminds me of some of those KJV onlyist preachers from the pulpit. They don't have to engage questions about textual criticism in Greek manuscripts. They don't have to address textual variants. They don't have to address the textual basis or lack thereof for certain readings in the KJV, like the book of Revelation and the last 6 verses there. They don't have to address historical problems there, textual problems, because most of the people in their audience, they know nothing about this stuff and are already sympathetic to their view that the KJV came down from heaven. So they know they don't have to address that stuff. They just have to say a couple points, push a few buttons, say a few buzzwords, and that's good enough for their audience. So that's why we see, some of these KJV preachers, I've shown it here on the channel, where they just completely sidestep questions like textual variants, textual basis for certain readings in the New Testament, issues related to the original manuscripts. They sidestep all of that, and then they just say, hold up that KJV Bible and say, I don't need to go to the Greek. I don't have to go over to that. I got my KJV right here. And everyone in the audience is like, yeah. That's good enough for their audience. And, when it comes to some of the people in the audience of the followers of Schneider and Vigano and stuff like that, they don't have to go into detail and interact with the Council of Trent or Vatican I and stuff like that. They don't have to do that. They just know that they can just say little silly things like, oh, well, yeah, the Latin Mass can't be banned any more than the Apostles' Creed, and all of their followers would be like, yeah. It's a little comical. At the same time, it is also sad. Okay, so anyways, those are the things that I wanted to touch on today. But I do want to hear from y'all. I want to give y'all an opportunity to comment. So what I'll do is go get a little bit more coffee and give y'all a moment to put your comments and questions in the chat, and I'll interact with those for a bit. Whether you agree with me, disagree, whatever, put it in there. Put it in the comments. If you're a troll, know that I will certainly interact with your comments, as you saw with Ben earlier. So I want to hear from everybody. So yeah, go ahead and take a few moments. Tag me in the comment section at Reason and Theology. I'm going to step away, get some more coffee, and then I'll engage some comments.
For a little girl growing up Catholic today, will she ever participate as a clergy member in the church?
No.
He shut that down. All right. I'm here because somehow Lofton, I'm Lofton now, got on my feed. I've heard of him and his reputation. Ah, yeah, you've heard of my reputation, most likely from liars and slanders, and decided to see for myself. Well, I hope you enjoyed the facts that I gave to you. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Mike Sainz says, let's accuse Schneider of heresy but never define it. Okay. Let's go through it again. Heresy is a denial of dogma. What is dogma? Dogma is a teaching that originates from divine revelation. So it's in divine revelation, either implicitly or explicitly. And it's confirmed by the church as such. That is what a dogma is. Now that you have your definition that I've given many times, but now that you have it again, do you care to interact with anything that I said? Why is it heretical? Because papal supremacy is a dogma. Part of exercising papal supremacy is authority over the liturgy and elements that are not of the substance of the liturgy. What is of the substance of the liturgy? The substance of the sacraments, as Trent says. The issue of the Missal of 62 and its alteration to the Missal of 69 has nothing to do with altering the substance of the sacraments. Ergo, it is a denial of papal supremacy to say that the Pope can restrict access or entirely discontinue access to the Missal of 62 and merely make provisions for the Missal of 69. Do you follow the argument? I know I've gone through it many, many times. I just reproduced it for you again, spelled it out for you. Care to interact with it? Let's see. Pope has full jurisdiction over liturgy. Right. That's a dogma. The dogma of papal supremacy. That includes authority over the liturgy. And so to deny that is heretical, because what is heresy? It's a denial of a dogma post-baptism. Has Schneider been baptized? Well, I would hope so if he's a bishop, right? He's an auxiliary bishop. Don't know for how long, but he's an auxiliary bishop, so I'm assuming he's been baptized. So he meets that part of the definition. He's been baptized, and then he denies a truth divinely revealed and confirmed by the church as such. There it is. It's a denial of papal supremacy. Now, he could say, I believe papal supremacy all day long, but you've redefined what papal supremacy is. All right, let's see. TLM should be offered for those that want it, but there are certain popular radical content providers out there who use TLM to sow division in the church, and that's a major issue for the Holy See. Yeah, and that's partly what I go over in that video that I pointed y'all to, the one about, is the Latin Mass going to be banned? Is Pope Francis going to ban the Latin Mass? There's some good people in the community, and there's some people who are bad who weaponize it. And so I think that provision will still be made for the good people through FSSP, ICKSP, and others, right? Pope Francis isn't going to take those away. In fact, just a few months ago, I think he reconfirmed to the FSSP. So I don't see him restricting access among those communities, because that's their entire charism. But for diocesan liturgies, it's possible he might do that. They're just rumors now, but it's possible he might restrict access to them even further. Again, in that video, I go over whether or not he should. Can he, though? Yes. Schneider is not saying should he. He's saying can he, and then he's saying no, he can't. Ergo heresy. The Gallican Rite would like a word with Bishop Athanasius Schneider. That's funny. And a lot of others too. Gail says, God bless you, stay strong. There are many more that agree with you than those who don't. I appreciate that. It'd be good to hear from those who stand with the magisterium. What will the FSSP do if the 62 is no longer allowed? Well, I do think that probably would not be the best move for the Pope. Probably not the best time to do that. Maybe 100 years from now we could talk about discontinuing that, but maybe not right now. Although it is important for us to help people see the need for the liturgical reforms that the Second Vatican Council called for. Not all of those reforms have been fully realized yet, though. And so more work on the reform of the reform needs to be done. More work on reforming the Novus Ordo needs to be done. And then maybe we can talk about that issue. But how would they react? Well, I would hope that they would follow the successor of St. Peter and realize that a particular form of the liturgy is not a deal breaker to break communion over, so that they would comply. There might be some people in that community who would not comply because they value that liturgy more than the essentials like communion with the successor of St. Peter and the dogmas of the faith. And that would just further prove Pope Francis's point. I don't think it's going to come to that, though. Okay. Michael engages with people that disagree, and Marsha bans them. That's a difference. Truth that is not hide. Not only that, but I also take their greatest representatives, and I take their material and I show it to you right here on the screen, and we walk through it line by line, and then I compare and contrast what they say with what the magisterium says line by line. So it's not an echo chamber here. I actually interact with the best that they have to offer, and I show that the best they have to offer, in some cases, contradicts the magisterium and is erroneous. Michael Lofton, you're correct. Apparently they only speak Latin in heaven. Well, it's not just, though, with a group of people who are diehard Missal of 62 Latin Mass, it's not just about Latin. It's also about particular readings. It's also about certain elements that are no longer in the Missal of 62, like the last gospel. So it's not just the issue of language. It's also about some of these other elements. Some of them also contest other canons in the Roman Rite. A number of issues. So. And then, of course, when it comes to the administration of communion, the orientation liturgically. So it's a number of things. Let's see. Oh, okay. What is the magisterial reference that says the Pope has the authority to alter liturgies? Well, we certainly have Trenta Vatican I, but also Mediator Dei. Was it Mediator Dei 58? Was it? Let me go to it. I go over them in that previous video that I pointed y'all to on Can Pope Francis ban the Latin Mass, but let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I think it's Mediator Dei 58. Yeah, here it is. So just offhand. By the way, the Vatican I is references in Pastor Eternus. And I forget which session Trent goes over, but I go over it in that video, so definitely go and watch it there. So Mediator Dei 58, it follows from this that the sovereign pontiff alone enjoys the right to recognize and establish any practice touching the worship of God, to introduce and approve new rites, also to modify those he judges to require modification. And it's what he judges, not what I judge. And that modification includes discontinuing. But the modifications that that the popes and the post-conciliar church have made to the Roman Rite, between the Missal of 62 and the Missal of 69 or 70, however you want to classify it, that's within his authority. So whether you like it or not, it's there. It's part of papal supremacy. And actually that's a good thing, because if we don't have that authority, we would end up in the same kind of problems as Eastern Orthodoxy. Okay. Do I think they'll evict the nuns from the convent? Well, I mean, if they continue to stay there and, won't leave, I think it will come to that, and has to come to that. Okay. From what I understand, the ultra trads on X, they have a sort of attachment to tradition of TLM due to its age and use, but also reject Vatican II as a whole, which is very scary. Yeah, so an ecumenical council, an extraordinary act of the College of Bishops, touches on the constitution of the church, altering the Missal of 62 in the way that was altered to what is erroneously, or I shouldn't say erroneously, but commonly called the Novus Ordo, or the Missal of 69, does not touch on the constitution of the church. Like the things that were modified there do not impact the substance of the constitution of the church or the substance of the faith, because the substance of the faith is the same between the two missals. So it impacts ecclesial traditions, liturgical traditions in a lower T, not liturgical traditions in a capital T, such as you have to use bread and wine to confect the Eucharist. That's a capital T liturgical tradition. What you'll notice from this group is they usually don't have any awareness of distinctions of various kinds of tradition. So if you were to ask, do this as a test, watch, I promise you, they won't know what they're talking about. Do this next time. When they say tradition, Pope can't change tradition. Ask them, can you tell me the difference between a divine apostolic tradition and a human apostolic tradition and an ecclesial tradition and a dominical tradition? Ask them if they can distinguish between these things. Passive tradition versus active tradition. Ask if they're able to, are they aware of any distinctions here? Of course, the answer is no. So they're very dogmatic about what can and can't change when it comes to tradition, but then they can't tell you the very basics of important and traditional distinctions on tradition. This isn't some kind of post-conciliar stuff anyway. It's all traditional distinctions on the concept of tradition that is very long-standing in the church. Because there certainly are various kinds, and there are some things that can't change with tradition, and there are some things that can change. It depends on what we're talking about, what kind of tradition we're talking about. Divine apostolic traditions cannot change, substantially speaking, nor can dominical traditions. But human apostolic traditions, ecclesial traditions, those can. It's a different question on whether or not they should, but they certainly can. So I would encourage you to maybe point to some of those distinctions. Now, I know I've covered them in previous shows here where I go over the various kinds of traditions. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, but okay. I go to a Novus Ordo all my life. I'm 65. I get a lot out of my mass. I'm staying. I'm good. I'm glad to hear that, Mary. Good. Mango Bango, thanks for the gift. Yeah, thank you for gifting those memberships, Hillary. Thank you for that. 20 memberships. Wow. Michael's saying, thanks for the interaction, Michael. You've outlined nothing that ipso facto defines papal supremacy. Oh, boy. You are rendering that the denial of a clause equals a denial of papal supremacy. Okay. You want me to now define papal supremacy for you as well? Okay, let's do that. Papal supremacy is the Pope has authority over to define and teach on matters of faith and morals and anything necessarily, whether by logical or historical necessity, related to faith and morals. And that includes then traditions and discipline. So he has the authority to weigh in on questions purely of faith and morals, or of things that are not purely faith and morals, but they relate to faith and morals either by historical or logical necessity, and then to impose disciplines and issue judgments liturgically or in discipline. Is that a good enough definition for you? Did you have an alternative definition? Now, of course, that definition that I just gave to you is what you will find as the church itself defines papal supremacy. So again, you have Trent, Vatican I, also Vatican II and Lumen Gentium, as well as other papal encyclicals that define papal supremacy. Not to mention, we could then talk about first millennium sources that talk about papal primacy or supremacy, whichever term you prefer, whether it be the Sixth Ecumenical Council or Seventh Ecumenical Council with Hadrian's letters. So why are you acting as if I'm not defining terms and not making the audience aware? I've done that for years on this channel. I guess you want me to reproduce definitions for terms on every show? Let me explain to you how it works with being a content creator. I do multiple shows a day. I've done probably close to 3,500 shows in 5 years. And I can tell you this, it is impossible to reproduce every claim about every subject in every video. Okay, so at some point you have to just trust that, people will go and check out some of your other material and stuff like that. If it's absolutely necessary to define something, maybe I'll reproduce that in a summary fashion, which I did here. But I can't repeat every potential point in every single show. It's obnoxious to even consider that. So why are you deflecting and playing this little game as if I have to sit here and define every little thing to make my point? Michael, you should already know what papal primacy is if you want to defend Schneider and Vigano, right? So I have to assume that my audience that wants to defend Vigano or Schneider, I kind of have to assume y'all know some basics, right? You didn't ask me to define like who Jesus is, did you? No, because you would reasonably expect me and expect the audience to kind of already know if they're having this discussion about papal authority and what Schneider said, right? You didn't ask me to define what a bishop is. You didn't ask me to define what baptism is. You didn't ask me to define what liturgy is, because again, you already have to assume that people know some basic stuff if they're having this discussion. I kind of have to assume you know some basic stuff about what papal supremacy is as well. So the fact that you're wanting me to even define it kind of proves my point. A lot of people who are in this discussion, who defend these guys, frankly, they don't belong in the discussion. They just need to restrict themselves to catechesis and learning about the faith. Lex Ludendi, we are so back. That's funny. Do I think that Taylor Marshall is a Protestant infiltrator? No, I don't. I think that he sincerely converted from Anglicanism to Catholicism. But I think that he didn't work through some issues ecclesiologically. And I think that he has certain deficiencies in his catechesis, especially when it comes to understanding of papal authority, the magisterium as a whole, and ecclesiology as a whole. I think there are certain gaps in his information and level of knowledge there. And those gaps have led him to making the wrong decisions and poorly evaluating certain things. I also think that he doesn't evaluate things very carefully. So I don't think that he's a Protestant infiltrator. I think that he's one among many people who sincerely converted, but they're poorly formed in certain key areas. And also, they don't do a lot of research when it comes to certain claims that they see on social media. So they just buy into it hook, line, and sinker. And that then results in faulty judgments. If you have faulty theology, that will result in faulty judgment. So if you have faulty theology or deficient and faulty theology, misinformation, what does that result in? A faulty judgment, right? I think that's much more likely than he's a Protestant infiltrator. I just think that that's way more unlikely. Worded differently, papal supremacy is defined. As defined, Schneider's words do not prove or suggest that he doesn't maintain. Michael saying, let me once again teach you a lesson here. People can say, I believe papal supremacy, and then redefine what it means and hold to a heretical definition. I already said that. So of course Schneider's going to say, I believe papal supremacy, but he redefines it to a very limited definition that no longer includes this kind of authority over the liturgy. And I'm telling you, according to Trent, Vatican I, Immediator Dei, that's a heretical definition of papal supremacy. Ergo, it's heresy. So again, as I've often pointed out, Eastern Orthodox will say, I believe in papal primacy, but they redefine what papal primacy is. How do you not understand that, Michael? It's basic stuff. Martin Luther says, I believe in the Catholic Church. He redefines what the Catholic Church is. He says, I believe the gospel. He redefines what the gospel is. He says, I believe in justification in Christ. He redefines what justification in Christ is. So, of course, Schneider says, I believe in papal primacy or supremacy, whichever term you prefer. Of course, he says it. He redefines what it is, contrary to the magisterium. This is basic stuff. Do you think that literally every heretic has to say, I deny this dogma? No, they just redefine what the dogma is. You are aware that heretical groups profess the Nicene Creed, right? But then they redefine the articles of the Nicene Creed. Do you know what modernism is? One of the aspects of modernism, it's not the only one, but one of the aspects of the heresy of modernism is to say, I believe in these dogmas of the creed, but they redefine what those dogmas mean. In other words, what Schneider is doing is very similar to what the modernists at the time of Pascendi did. So why are you doing this? It would be better for you to adopt a disposition of humility and learn rather than attempt to pontificate. But y'all see this. This is what happens whenever you challenge the followers of these guys. They're bankrupt. They don't have formation in this area. And when you give them facts, they can't grapple with it. And then they end up coming with comments that, if applied consistently, would end up justifying the Protestants or the Eastern Orthodox. Michael banned a bud of mine. Let's not sanitize them. Michael saying, yeah, first of all, you're not living consistently with your name. Number two, Mike, let me explain something to you. Your friend was probably a troll, just like you are. So yeah, I do ban trolls, but notice how much leeway I've given you. See you later, Mike. Okay, what else we got? Our Blessed Mother and Saints have given warnings. They fought against the Lutheran heresy. You either believe that or your own imagination. Well, yeah, I mean, Notice that I stand with the magisterium. Notice what all these guys do to the man, every one of them. They push back and deny magisterial authority or magisterial teachings, either directly or indirectly. Notice, though, that I'm standing with the magisterium. And that's what I'm calling y'all to do. Because if you don't, you really aren't in a position to start criticizing others like Luther. You're really not in that position. So this long list of heretics and schismatics that we have throughout church history, you're not in a position to criticize them when you're in dissent against the magisterium yourself. Okay. All right, let's see what Frank says. As a non-Catholic outside observer, I sort of like Vigano, but whether you approve of him or not, he left the Pope no choice but to excommunicate him. No organization can tolerate insubordination. Well, it's not just that, though. That's not... There's a lot of problems with Vigano, and this is just one thing that he was excommunicated for. There's a lot of others he could be excommunicated for. Certainly insubordination, but what about illicit ordinations and schismatic seminaries, and it seems maybe even him having been reordained, also a schismatic act. Doctrinal errors, wild conspiracy theories, horrible slander against the successor of St. Peter, and again, a failure to address the situation with McCarrick when he was nuncio. There's a lot of problems surrounding him. So I just don't see how you like Vigano in any way as a non-Catholic observer, to be honest. I just, maybe it's because you're just not aware of this stuff. Okay, let's see what else we got. Oh, I addressed that one already, Jesse. Palermo says, need to bring back the sacred kiss to be Radtrad. Need to bring the agape feast back, right? None of us have those. None of us. There is a trace of it in the Byzantine liturgy, a trace. And that is the prosphora bread that is given out, the Antiteron, at the very end of the liturgy. It's blessed bread, but it's not the Eucharist. That's like a trace of the agape feast. So none of our liturgies have that. And that was a pretty contextual aspect to apostolic liturgies, though it's not essential to it, and therefore it could eventually be discontinued, which it was, which is why we ended up having canons in the East forbidding the holding of agape feasts. So here you have the forbidding canonically of what used to be done apostolically. If the church doesn't have this kind of authority, like Schneider is saying, then we couldn't restrict communion to under one kind, and the Protestants were right. We couldn't discontinue agape feasts and so on, and Protestants were then right. So again, this heretical view that Schneider is espousing here, which is not unique to him, it's a lot of people, it's characteristic of a lot of people in this group. It really does lead you to adopt a position that the Catholic Church has been wrong all along. Let's see. What else we got? Magisterium is greater than apparitions. Right. Does denying Vatican II mean denying Vatican II popes as well? Yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier. It does. Because you have all of these popes who promulgated it. It wasn't just promulgated in part by John Paul John the 23rd, the sessions that he approved. Well, in fact, I actually think that though he held sessions, wasn't it Paul the Sixth who approved all of the sessions? You get what I'm saying. It's not just not John Paul II, Paul VI. It's not just John the 23rd and Paul VI who promulgated Vatican II. It's not just them. It's all the subsequent popes. So John Paul I, John Paul II, Benedict, and Francis. They've all in their magisterium promulgated it. And all of the College of Bishops have endorsed Vatican II from the time of John the 23rd to the present. The College of Bishops collectively has endorsed Vatican II. So you would not only have to say all of the popes in the post-conciliar period aren't popes. You would also have to say there hasn't been a College of Bishops since 1958. If you no longer have a papacy and you no longer have the College of Bishops, that has falsified Catholicism. Why are you wasting your time talking about Catholicism? Go be Orthodox or something else. It's why it's inconsistent for these sedevacantists to be in this middle position of they still want to hold to what they think is historical Catholicism, all the while undercutting the ground on which Catholicism rests on. It's a really poorly thought out and shallow position. And they're in this transitionary period in position because they haven't thought through their position theologically sufficiently. If you read Justin Martyr's description of the liturgy, it greatly resembles the Novus Ordo. Some aspects of it, right? Some aspects. But it also resembles most other liturgies, Roman or otherwise, Byzantine, Armenian, Coptic or otherwise, right? So I get what you're saying. I would say what you see there with Justin is a very, very basic skeleton structure that's pretty much common to all liturgical liturgies, liturgical rites. Sister Lucia accepted Vatican II and the Novus Ordo. Yeah. All right. Would it be a good idea to make a separate Latin rite along with the Roman rite? Well, I think I may understand your question. We can already distinguish between the Roman rite and the Latin rite, broadly speaking, because there certainly are some minor distinctions that we can make between them, right? You could say like the Celtic rite falls within the Latin rite. Kind of depends on how we're defining our terms here. Jesse says about Taylor Marshall, I find it suspicious that just months after becoming a Protestant priest, he converted to Catholicism. I don't make too much about that. Michael Skate, you're killing me. My argument is childishly simple. Oh, you're right about that. Schneider did not say I refuse to believe that the Pope, by reason of his office as vicar, the visible source and foundation of the unity. Do I have to repeat it again? Do y'all in the audience see what I have to deal with every day? And do y'all see how bankrupt they are? Do I have to repeat it again? Again, a person can say, I believe the Pope has full supreme power and authority in the church. But then they redefine what that means. Again, Eastern Orthodox do the same. Talk to any educated Orthodox. Talk to a educated Orthodox professor. They will say they hold to papal primacy, but they redefine what it means. You understand? They'll even use the same language that Catholics will use in many cases, but they redefine what it means, at the very least in practice. Do you get it now? It doesn't matter what you say as far as I believe this dogma if you're redefining the meaning of it and the application of that dogma. Does that finally click for you, or you still not following? Again, your modernists at the time of the turn of the 20th century say, I believe in the resurrection. But when you ask them to define it, they completely redefine what the resurrection is, so that it's not what we mean by the resurrection of Jesus. Same thing. So I don't care if you pay lip service to it. In reality, you're redefining what it is, and in practice, you're also denying it. Practically. What good is it to say, I believe in papal primacy, if you're then denying that the Pope actually can alter the Missal of 62 to the Missal of 69 in the way that he did? You're still denying it regardless of what you say. You're just being inconsistent. Do you finally get it? The only thing I can agree with you is your argument is childishly simple. That's right. Your thinking is as well. Again, you would do better to adopt a disposition here of humility rather than pontificating, rather than trying to defend these schismatics. Just revert to catechesis mode, learning mode. And you're welcome here to learn. I have so much content for you. Again, go to the Magisterium playlist. Go to those videos I've pointed you to in this video itself. Go and work through those, and then we'll talk. Let's see what else we got. Private revelation is not greater than public revelation. Correct. Well, you're continuing to gaslight Michael Saint. I gave you plenty of opportunities. Let's see. But again, I have to point out to y'all, this is almost all of them. They're almost to the man. This is what they're like. They can't actually engage the arguments in any kind of consistent and informed way. Hence why they are what they are. The reason why they are followers of guys like Vigano and Schneider, the reason why they are adopting these schismatic positions is because they don't know this information. Looks like Noah just became a new member. That's awesome. Good to have you. You must define what is before I can listen anymore. Yeah, that's basically what this guy is doing, right? Instead of really addressing what I'm saying, we engage in this kind of sophistry. Yeah. What is, but is really is. Okay, let's see. Thank you. Perhaps he gets caught up in the sensational stories without doing his own research. I think that's part of it. Yeah. Talking about Taylor Marshall. Yeah. I think Taylor Marshall is good fundamentally. He convinced me to learn prayers in Latin. He's just misguided on points he makes. Well, but I could kind of say that of Luther too, right? I mean, he had a whole lot of things that he was good about, and he taught a lot of people to pray, you know. But then he has some aspects that are really dangerous and poisonous. It's the same for Taylor Marshall. He has some aspects that are really dangerous and poisonous. Let's see. Do you get a lot of Protestant infiltrators? I would never lie about my Protestantism. Lying about your religion seems... I don't know anybody who like is an admitted Actually, I do know one guy. Who was telling people, who admitted that he was claiming to be Catholic, but really he was Protestant, and he was doing that to reach Catholics. I only know of one guy who actually admitted that, and that was years ago. Hallelujah tells a commenter, you're using private revelation to argue against the magisterium. Funny how they do that, right? The Mass of Divine Worship we use in the Ordinariate has the Asperges, prayers at the foot of the altar, the final gospel. If you want those, get a community started. Yeah, I do like the sprinkling, right? At the beginning. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for that super chat. Gurgley says, thank you for your work. I appreciate that. Thank you. Why do you have to define everything before conversing with a trad? That's funny, right? I mean, you would think if I'm talking to a traditionalist, I wouldn't have to define papal supremacy. You would think they would already know a definition of papal supremacy from, I don't know, any first millennium source or second millennium source, so that we then just need to discuss the details of it at that point. And the detail includes authority over the liturgy and anything that doesn't impact the substance of the sacraments. That's right there from Trent. And so why do I have to spell that out? Shouldn't they already know this? Aren't they traditionalists? This is why I say this group is not traditional. They're anything but traditional. The traditional ones are the ones who actually follow the magisterium. These guys know nothing about the magisterium. Yeah, good point, Haley. I could teach heresy and never declare I teach heresy. Right. Right. Again, that's exactly what the modernists were doing. You can expose heresy without being formally declared a heretic. I think you mean espouse, Lex. Yes, I agree with you. You can. So do you know what Pope Pius IX wrote against heresy? Yes. And in fact, I absolutely value his pontificate because he's the first one who really gave us the term magisterium, by the way. Not the concept, right, but the term. And he has a whole lot of magisterial documents that are very important in understanding the magisterium. Who do I think will be the next pope? Yeah, it's hard to say. I do have that video, Who Will Be the Next Pope, that I just did a couple months ago. I kind of give you the top 5 people that I think are up for it. Certainly go and check that out. Okay. Mary says, wake up, folks. No one has the right to slander any Pope. Vigano and all of them bring division from within the church when we should be united. The devil's got game. The devil knows how to deceive. Okay, what else we got? What about Bishop Strickland? What about him? A lot to say. I mean, I got a lot of videos about him, but maybe go and watch the show I did about him and Burke yesterday. Go and consider those questions. If the TLM started in 1570, how can people say it's the only true mass? Well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. They'll say that, of course, with Quo Primum and others in the late 1500s, that's whenever the Tridentine Missal and the Roman liturgy was being promulgated a little bit in a more pervasive way. But they wouldn't say it didn't start then. The aspects that you would pretty much find in the Tridentine liturgy at that time did pre-exist its promulgation. So they would normally point to that. But of course, there's a lot of other considerable points here to examine in the history of the development of the Roman Rite. So I would say it's a little bit more complex than that. By the way, the Missal of 62 is there's some significant differences between it and what was actually promulgated at the time with Quo Primum. Ponti says, in reference to that other Michael, it seems very simple. Michael has been confused. Well, he came to the right place, but he needs to adopt the right attitude, and that is one of learning. Have I read Infiltration? Yes, it's absolutely atrocious. Not only is there a lot of misinformation in it, it is one of the most poorly written things I've ever seen from anyone who actually holds the title of doctor. I can't believe anybody who holds the title of doctor would write so poorly. Very poor use of citations. Numerous claims were made in there. No sources cited. It's atrocious. Got 2 videos going through some of that on the book review of Infiltration. So go and check that out. Lex says, can you say it a little slower? Or they can just press the rewind button, right? One of the two. Where he says, Michael, you're a gentleman and a scholar. You're definitely much more patient when it comes to the trolls. I try, y'all. I try, but I deal with hundreds of them a day, and it wears on you. Good to see you, Great Wall. Hi, Michael and Chad. I'll have to go back and watch this from the beginning. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So, Michael, we don't have to agree. Okay, I think that was in reference to the other Michael. We don't have to agree with Pope Francis on matters not relating to faith and morals. Or that might be for me. Okay, so, all right, here's again kind of how it works. If the issue is either about faith and morals directly, or is related to faith and morals by way of logical and historical necessity, then it is binding. So an example of that would be faith and morals. I mean, you could say in reference to faith, Jesus is consubstantial with the Father, right? But what if somebody says, yeah, Jesus is consubstantial with the Father, but I don't believe Jesus ever historically existed. So they redefine what consubstantial with the Father means in some kind of way that they'll accept that proposition, but deny the historicity of the existence of Jesus. So maybe they change what Jesus is to be some kind of concept and idea rather than a historical person. Well, the historicity of Jesus is that directly an object of faith and morals? No, but it is indirectly because it impacts propositions of faith and morals, like the one I just mentioned. Because if Jesus didn't historically exist, it really does become meaningless to say Jesus is consubstantial with the Father. So there's a historical example. Logical necessity, I would maybe point to the concept of the distinction between substance and accidents in relation to the dogma of transubstantiation. You can't hold the dogma of transubstantiation if you deny the distinction between substance and accidents. I just don't see how you could. If you deny that distinction, you're indirectly denying the dogma of transubstantiation. So you have to accept the distinction between substance and accidents. Is the distinction of substance and accidents directly faith and morals? I don't think so, but I do think it's indirectly by logical necessity. So if the Pope teaches on a matter of faith and morals, obviously that's binding on the conscience. But if he teaches on something that's indirectly on faith and morals by historical or logical necessity, then that too is also binding on the conscience. And that then impacts questions related to the environment or migration and stuff like that, that may not be in all cases immediately faith and morals, but they are related to faith and morals in some kind of logical way. That's what we would call secondary objects of the magisterium, as opposed to primary objects. Definitely check out my content on the magisterium. I go into this in a lot more detail there. God bless everyone, even my chat detractors. Great show, Michael. Going to play some golf. That sounds like fun. I need to go hang out with you. Can you teach me how to play golf? Word around town is that Marshall denies the moon landing. Yes, he does. Which, as others have pointed out, I would say, if you're going to deny all of the evidence for the moon landing, you would then also have to deny evidence for the resurrection. So it's a logically inconsistent position. Yeah, I answered this one the other day, Josh. How do we understand that the Pope can change liturgy and Pope Benedict XVI statement that it can't be suddenly discontinued? Well, and I think he's referring to can't being practically. In other words, shouldn't, not potentially as far as papal power. He's not denying papal primacy and its authority. But what he's saying there is it can't, insofar as it wouldn't make any sense for what was literally a year ago considered to be sanctifying. 1 year later, it's no longer considered suitable to sanctify. I mean, that's what he's saying, and I totally agree. And that's why you don't need to have just a quick decision here. I agree with what Benedict is saying, but it hasn't been a quick decision. We've had a long time between the Second Vatican Council and today, so it's not a case of being suddenly discontinued. So I would point out that's why it was important for Paul VI and John Paul II and others to give these indults, which they did, even prior to Lefebvre doing what he did. So it wasn't Lefebvre that somehow saved the Missal of 62. Absurd. You already had indults prior to that. And for that very reason, to not suddenly discontinue for some people who pastorally need this. So yeah, that's one thing I would note there. Yeah, I'm going to be having Blue Collar on. I needed to get back with him and set a date. I had to change my schedule on some things, so that'll happen soon. Jimmy says, I schismed for a while, and it was based on conspiracy with many holes. In the end, it just seemed like a group of, I don't know what HOA is, board members who mismanage funds. The same will happen to others. Yeah, I've been there. I know what you mean. Yeah, it's easy to fall into when you don't have enough formation in certain key areas, and you also are buying into information without verifying it. Yeah, it's easy to fall into. Oh, I love it. How can Catholic defend the evil pagan Pachamama in the Vatican gardens? Oh, you came to the right place, Catholic Crusader. Should we tell them? Let's go to it real quick. Let me pull it up. I guess it's time for me to restream this one for the sixth time, right? This is why I keep restreaming it. Didn't Vigano, by the way, bring up Pachamama again in his declaration of schism a couple days ago? He brought it up again. These guys are so bankrupt. They still come with this. All right, well, here's an answer to your question. Go to this video. Bishop Joseph Strickland denounces the Pachamama idol. Go to this. It's 3.5 hours long, and the reason why is a combined 2 episodes. It has been thoroughly debunked. It wasn't Pachamama. So sneak peek, it wasn't Pachamama. It was Our Lady of the Amazon. Whether you think that's an appropriate image or not is irrelevant. It wasn't an idol, and therefore there was no idolatry. Go and watch that. I show you not only all of that information and walk through the ceremony play by play, but also then show you how this false narrative began and then continued in the media. I show you where it started and how it continued. I go through everything. Watch that and then come back and ask me any follow-up questions. But if you don't watch that, then you're not sincere in asking the question. But if you are really sincere, you really do want to know the truth, go and watch that. All right, I'm going to get some more coffee and then answer a few more questions. These are great questions. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com. Hey friends, I'm now teaching as an adjunct professor at Catholic Polytechnic University, and I am excited to announce that we will be offering the first ever Magisterial Studies Certificate program. It consists of 3 courses: an introduction to the magisterium, councils, dogmas, canons, and decrees, and evaluating magisterial teachings. If you want to further your education and learn more about Catholic teaching authority, this is the program for you. Check out catholicpolytechnic.org and click on the certificate tab at the top to sign up for the course today. All right, but Pope Francis has a statue of Luther, the heretic, in the Vatican. Yeah, which I think is ridiculous, right? It seems that he has been going with that joint document between Catholics and certain Lutherans on the question of justification, and kind of feels like, oh, well, there was a big misunderstanding. We substantially agree. I don't think that's really accurate. I think that there's some more fundamental differences there. And it's certainly not an agreement with all Lutherans, let alone all Protestants, let alone with Luther's thought. So I would say there's a point of disconnect there. I think that he's misinformed on some points about Luther, and then has latched on to the fact that Luther was certainly driven because he saw abuses and he was zealous for the gospel. And insofar as one wants to root out abuses and preach the gospel, I can say we share something in common. The problem is Luther went beyond that, introduced some other theological errors, and redefined the gospel. So I do think that that's an example where I don't think that Pope Francis is very well informed on some aspects about Luther, and so it's really definitely bad optics, and I would caution against it. But I would point out that it's not the first time we've had stuff like this. We have in our liturgical tradition all sorts of very curious things that might be analogous. And here I'm talking about venerating some people who are not always in full communion and died out of full communion, all sorts of things. Let's see. Michael Lofton, you're 100% correct. Trading means staying anchored to the majesty. Trading? I think you mean tradition. Yeah. Okay, yeah, traditional. Mm-hmm. Yep. Being traditional is anchored to the magisterium. Absolutely. But notice all of these people who say they're traditional, every single one of them, they dissent against the magisterium. They're not traditional. Every single one of them. Notice that. They want to say they're the trads. No, you aren't. Those who follow the magisterium are the traditional Catholics, not you guys. Here's a super chat. Life is so much better when we let the magisterium guide us instead of our own worldly inclinations. We are assured to be on the side of truth. Absolutely. I think a lot of the insistence on the TLM comes from the works righteousness I was warned about as a Protestant kid, as if using Latin is somehow more virtuous than English. There is an element of superstition among some, not all, but some of the people who are attached to the Missal of 62. Not all. But if you think that the Missal of 62 offers more grace than the Missal of 69, that is an element of superstition. Yesterday, TM said some harsh lies about post-splainers. Not the first time. Ironically, right after I was thinking maybe he's okay, wow, okay, got my answers, I'm done fact-checking his videos. Yeah. Catholic Crusader says, you don't need to listen to commentary. Your eyes don't deceive you. And the Pacha evil idol, you see the evil right there in the Vatican garden. Catholic Crusader, don't be a meme. You're being a meme right now. Don't be a meme. Again, deal with the facts. If you can't deal with the facts and you come with ridiculous stuff like this of, oh, it's an idol because you could just see it's an idol. That's what the Protestants say about Catholics. That's exactly what Protestants say. So unless you're a Protestant, and it doesn't seem like you think you are because you call yourself Catholic Crusader, unless you're a Protestant, don't be a meme, because you're being a meme right now. If you can't engage the facts surrounding the Pachamama issue, then I think we all see you for what you are. But if you want to be sincere, go and watch this video and engage it directly. Don't come with weak stuff like, hey, it's an idol because it looks like an idol. You could just see the evil right in it. It's not going to work. Not for Catholics, because that's exactly what a Protestant would say about our statues about the Virgin Mary. So, not going to work. What else we got? Hallelujah, you're right. Methinks you're not here in goodwill. Well, I think you're right about that. But we will still confront them with the truth. Oh, this is hilarious. Silverstream. I just got out of the shower. Can you give a recap? No, I can't. All right, here's a recap. We once again refuted Vigano, Schneider, and also covered the issue of the excommunication of the Spanish nuns, and then took Q&A. There's your recap. Go and watch the video. Okay, so now Catholic Crusader, he's still trolling. Amores Laetitia, footnote 351. What about that? Where's the faith of morals? Come on. Yeah, see, I addressed footnote 51 at length in a whole video just for people like you. Here you go. And by the way, have you read the Dubia response to Cardinal Duca? Oh, you weren't aware of that, were you? Oh, yeah. I'm not talking about footnote 51, but probably aren't even aware of a whole Dubia response. Sip my coffee. Tell me what footnote 351 is, and then tell me about the response to Cardinal Duca by the DDF. What was it? October of last year? Tell me about that. Anyways, let me show y'all a couple of videos for those of y'all who are sincere and actually want to know about footnote 51, which some are going to claim admits communion for those who are obstinately living in adultery. The video that you will want to go over is, here it is. Okay. A couple points, and then I'll give you a quick summary answer. For the detailed version, you're going to want to go to the video, The Truth About Amores Laetitia. I gave a 2.5-hour presentation covering every aspect about Amores Laetitia to that day. You'll also want to do a follow-up video with more information on the Dubia, Amores Laetitia Dubia Answered. You want to go and watch those videos, and pretty much every question that you could conceivably ask about Amores Laetitia is answered. Number 2, I'll point out that footnote 351 was never allowing anybody who's living obstinately in a state of grave sin to receive Holy Communion without going to confession. That was something that people were reading into the footnote. Pope Francis has clarified multiple times that that's not the case, and people who are living in grave sin need to go to confession first before they receive the Eucharist. So there's your answer. That's the short answer. Go and watch those videos for the long answer. Let's see what else we got. He didn't know we were going to be ready for that one. Besides Taylor, who else should we be careful with? Anybody who is promoting dissent against the magisterium, which is unfortunately a lot of people. Go to my Catholic controversies playlist and you'll see a whole bunch of people, unfortunately, there. Okay, what else we got? Have I reviewed Schneider's Catechism Credo? A couple videos about Credo. One disturbing one you'll want to watch is this one. Well, a couple of them actually. Bishop Athanasius Schneider Credo Redefines Schism. Watch that one. Bishop Athanasius Schneider's Credo on Papal Heresy. Watch that one. And then the most disturbing one has to be this video right here. What Schneider's Credo didn't tell you about Pope Francis. Go and watch that one. It's why I don't believe that he has integrity. Also, go and watch Bishop Athanasius Schneider's Credo Catechism. Those are 4 videos that I did. I've had Schneider on the show before, and I'm ashamed that that is the case. I thought he was a man of integrity until I saw what he did in Credo by bearing false witness about Pope Francis in relation to pluralism, when Pope Francis himself told him and corrected him about the accusation, and he did not tell that to his audience in Credo. But still repeated the misinformation, knowing that Pope Francis had a private conversation with him personally, and even told him to share that conversation with the whole world. He didn't share that with people in Credo, but he shared the false accusation that he knew better than. That's when I said this man is not sincere. Jesse, I really enjoy your channel. I really like that you actually show Vatican documents in your videos. Yeah, have you noticed that I actually go through the documents as opposed to a lot of these other people who don't even read the documents, let alone do they go through them with their audience? Partly because they, again, haven't read the documents. And then number 2, there's stuff in the document, if they actually shared it with their audience or read it to them, like fiducia supplicans, it would completely undermine their own agenda. Any more updates on the possible restrictions on the extraordinary form? Not yet. Not that I've seen. Matthew, I used to like Schneider. Yeah, like I said, I had him on the show. I had Strickland on the show. I had Cardinal Zinn on the show. All of them turned out to be bad news. Some more than others, by the way. Yeah, when I saw that with issue with Credo, I couldn't believe how dare you bear false witness against the successor of St. Peter, accuse him of heresy with information that you know was refuted to you personally by Pope Francis, and you didn't share that with your audience. At least put it in the footnote if you're going to repeat the slander. At least put in the footnote, well, Pope Francis personally did tell me that he doesn't actually believe this, and this is what he believes. You can't tell me that's a person of goodwill who does that. Thank you for the super chat there. Keep up great work, Michael. I appreciate that. Thank you. Michael is fortunate he doesn't have to deal with HOA. What's HOA? Let's Google here. Homeowners Association. Oh, yeah. We don't have that in my neighborhood, so I'm good. I would hate that. Man. I couldn't deal with that. I could not deal with that. It's a no for me. Will we ever get a Lofton versus Marshall one day? Well, he was offered $10,000 to debate me, and he ignored it. At this point, that ship has sailed. At this point, I'm more than content to just refute him in the way that I've done. He can continue to do what he's doing, and I'll continue to refute him. The Pachamama card. Yeah, they throw it down. They throw it down every time. They take it, whenever you refute them and expose all of their lies, they take it and bam, throw that thing down and think that just settles everything. It's the Trump card, Nacho Mama. Pachamama is Nacho Mama. Yeah. Did I do a video on Pope Francis and the Luther statue? No, but maybe I should. If there's enough interest, I can. I think this is one of those areas where I just think that's a bad practical judgment on his part. Obviously, this is not even a judgment of an act of the Holy See. It's just a bad private judgment to even have something like that around. I don't think that's certainly not good optics, and it certainly also sends the wrong message. What is his intention? His intention's good, to try to show that we have some kind of commonality, or so he thinks, with Lutherans. But I would say it's misplaced. It's misguided. The point of disconnect is actually greater than he realizes. So it's misguided. It sends the wrong message, and I don't think that's a good idea. I'm actually beginning to feel sorry for Pachamama. I mean, the statue. She's so abused. Look, I personally don't like the image. I don't think it's. I don't at all relate to that image of the Virgin Mary. Then again, I also don't relate to some paintings of the Virgin Mary from the medieval period. It's a no for me. I also don't like some images of Jesus that are currently floating around now and also in the medieval period. It's a no for me. It's a no. But I recognize that's different. That's a very different claim than it's an idol, it's satanic, it's, idolatry. That's a different question. Is there a particular order to read Vatican II? Just start with the four primary documents. And in fact, I think Bishop Barron has a book on the four documents. So with the four principal documents, in addition to some commentary on them, go and get that. Read that. Pope not well informed. He's got a whole secret library. That's hilarious. He has access to the information, certainly, but he's still not well informed. Just because you have access to something doesn't mean that you've tapped into that information. I have access to a lot of stuff here in this library of mine here in the office, but I still don't know all the information in all of these books, right? So having access to it and actually being aware are two different things. Three pillars: sacred tradition, sacred scripture, and the magisterium. Absolutely. Here's an idea: documents of Vatican II in a year or less. And maybe we can do that. Yeah. Real talk, PB&J for lunch or shredded chuck roast stew? I'd have to go with the stew, although neither one of those would be, staples for me. I dislike being called a Pope-splainer and ex. I believe in the magisterium. Hey, wear it with as a badge of honor, because it means that you are defending the magisterium. By the way, in addition to being a Pope-splainer, I'm also a Jesus-splainer, because there's a lot of stuff that you have to explain that Jesus said that a lot of people misunderstand, such as Jesus saying no one knows the day or the hour of the second coming, including the Son of Man. There's a lot of Jesus-splaining that needs to be done to explain why Jesus is divine, and yet he says he doesn't know the day or hour of his coming. Jesus-splaining is needed. Jesus-splaining is needed when he says no one is good except God. Jesus-splaining is needed whenever he says that call no man father or call no man teacher. Jesus-splaining is needed there. So I'm happy to be a God-splainer, Jesus-splainer, Pope-splainer, Bible-splainer. TLM goers do believe they get more grace from the 62 Missal. Not all of them. Not all. Don't put everybody in the category. There's some people who go to the, the extraordinary form who wouldn't say that, and don't believe that. But some of them do, and that is prevalent within that community, and that is probably right. Some of us Novus Ordo goers feel very lowly. Last will be first. That's funny. Okay. So yeah, I mean, same amount of grace is offered in every liturgy, no matter what the rite is. The reason is the source of the grace is the sacrament itself. So it'd be the Eucharist. So it'd be Jesus. That's the source of the grace. So yeah, regardless of what form or rite you're going to, the same amount is given. Now, how much you receive does depend on you and your disposition. And it could be that you subjectively are better disposed to receive at the Latin Mass than a Novus Ordo. That might be, but objectively, you're given the same amount. What I find funny is how people will point to X footnote as if church wasn't initially aware of it. Yeah, it's hilarious. The guy pointed me to footnote 351, which I've dealt with extensively. It's hilarious. He points me to a footnote and ignores an entire dubia. An entire dubia response, an entire document of the magisterium. Ignores that, but then points me to a footnote from 2016. Yeah. We're aware of the footnote. We've accounted for it. Zelda stream tonight? Probably not tonight. Just got too much. In fact, I need to prepare for the lecture on Monday. I got my second lesson for the course on Introduction to the Magisterium with Catholic Polytechnic University, going over the New Testament foundation for the Magisterium. I gotta go ahead and create my lecture for that. So I'll be doing that this evening. So I doubt very seriously we'll have a chance to do that. Very sad to see from Schneider, and so many people don't even know this happened. Yeah, I mean, because the truth is a lot harder to get out there than the lies. Documents equal facts in many cases. Yeah. Why is the church banning TLM if it's bringing people to Mass? Well, it's not necessarily banning it. That's just a rumor. But yes, there are some people who are coming to that liturgy. There's also a lot of people who are leaving the church because of the weaponization of that liturgy. So you need to account for that as well. And that's what the church is grappling with. And number two, I would also point out that I sure hope they're not coming to the church just because of the Missal 62. Now, certainly it can be used as a form of evangelism, and that's great. But if that's the only reason why they're there, then that's a problem. But yeah, you need to consider that other flip side, that many people are weaponizing it and then sending people outside of the church, or they'll still stick around our churches, but they will adopt a schismatic position and then weaponize that liturgy and then infect more people who are coming to those masses. You need to account for that. Cardinal Zen went bad. Well, I mean, he accuses Pope Francis of teaching heresy. So I would say if you accuse the magisterium of teaching heresy, it's not a good thing. So I do have a video specifically on Cardinal Zen recently called Cardinal Zen Shuts Down Taylor Marshall ? And then there's another one called Cardinal Zen Accuses Vatican of Heresy. Go and watch those. We're seeing cardinals, bishops, and all of that falling left and right. Michael's about 20 minutes behind the chat. Yeah, maybe so. I guess so. Okay. Do Marshall or any of the dissenters ever respond to your refutations? Not directly, but I have seen Marshall try to respond indirectly to some of the things I said, and it was hilariously bad. And then I tore him apart for it. Because if you're going to try to interact with me, you need to actually interact with my position. If you're not going to do that and you're going to interact with a straw man, you're just going to make it worse. It'd be better to just be quiet. Because if you open your mouth and you say something about me that isn't true, and you have that kind of influence, oh yeah, I'm going to address that. They don't address my actual points. So if that answers your question. Michael has access to his cardboard library, but he hasn't tapped into it. That's hilarious. What's my take on DeClue? I've had him on the show before. Has some good stuff from everything I've seen. I think you may have talked about him before. Yeah, I haven't seen anything bad from DeClue. Everything has been great. So from what I've seen, Dr. DeClue is on point, you know. In fact, I saw him on that interview say a lot of the same stuff that I've been saying. So seems like, you know, we think alike. Lex, I'm a magisterium explainer these days. Right. There you go. Godsplaining is one of my favorite podcasts. That's funny. I'd like to see Dr. Petrie on the show. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's a busy man. He's really busy. Love to have him back on. Got to get him in person over here. We're both in Louisiana, but it's a little bit of a drive, and he's swamped right now. He's got a lot of projects he's working on. I think he's got another book that's been due for a while, and so he's bogged down, and so it might be a while. I'm not putting any pressure on him. Just whenever he can, it's cool, you know. Whenever he can. Michael's dog name is Boxer. That proves his books are all boxes. That's great. I love that one. That's hilarious. I'm glad to be a Jesus explainer. Yeah. DPS, thank you for the super chat. It's not Pachamama, it's our mama. Have you seen Bishop Barron's video on the McCarrick report? He doesn't say Vigano's name, but I think he wanted to. He was very disappointed with how McCarrick was not dealt with right away. Can you send that to me? I didn't see his. I'd like to watch that. Yeah. Okay, what else we got? Are Latin prayers more pleasing to the Lord? An exorcist mentioned they are, and yet that same exorcist is very problematic, by the way. By the way, check out some information surrounding the exorcist that you're talking about, and I think you'll start to find some disturbing stuff, but that's all I'll say right now. But other exorcists say the exact opposite. In fact, I've had Father Carlos on, and I asked him the very same question. Go and watch the video, Shocking Interview with a Real Exorcist, Father Carlos Martins. And I specifically asked him the question about, you know, is Latin more effective in exorcisms and stuff like that? And he says, no. He says, Latin in and of itself is not. In fact, that would be superstitious to say that it is. So go and watch that. Yeah, stay away from the exorcists who tell you that, because they have deeper problems than just telling you wild stuff like that. Thanks. I was thinking about the intention of the heart. Yeah. Now, I will say this. Some exorcists might think that Latin is more powerful, and insofar as that is the case, it might be, practically speaking, more effective in their own exorcisms, but not because of Latin, but because of their subjective disposition towards the language. 100K cardboard plaque. Hilarious. Great Wall, I see your question about the conference. You're talking about Auburn Avenue Presbyterian Church, which is no longer called that. And you're talking about Steve Wilkins, Pastor Steve Wilkins. What else we got? Alexander, I see your question. Well, Susan, aren't exorcists who talk to the demons engaging themselves? Yeah, the ones who consult demons for information are very problematic. Again, see that interview with Father Carlos Martins where I ask him about exorcists who do that, and he shows you why that's very problematic. So go and watch that video. Yes, that's one of the reasons why I say stay away from those guys. All right. I think I grabbed everything, so we'll go ahead and end it there. We're around 2.5 hours, so that's a pretty good stream. Got some good Q&A in here. Yeah, Angela, going to have Blue Collar Catholic on pretty soon, so stay tuned. I'll get you a date on that soon. Okay. Ponte, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Well, hey, good to see y'all. Happy to answer questions. Thank y'all, trolls, for showing up. You make the show great. Thank you, Jesse. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed this. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll do it again soon. God bless. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com.